Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I respectfully oppose SB13 because we have spent the last few sessions trying to pass legislation that requires us to babysit books. As someone who became an orphan at 15, books saved me. I didn't have a parent to talk about grief, identity, or what it meant to grow up in a world that didn't always see me. But I found myself in a book. That book gave me language for what I was feeling and hope that I wasn't alone. This bill threatens to take that same opportunity away from the next generation. SB13 may appear to be about parental rights, but what it really does is it opens the door to censorship of the kinds of stories that many kids depend on. Books help our kids understand the world, and sometimes they help them survive it. A book about puberty helps a child whose parents won't talk to them. A novel about coming out helps a teenager who's afraid of being rejected. A memoir about crossing the border helps a student feel seen when other people call him or her illegal. And let's be honest, this bill doesn't affect all students equally. It disproportionately targets books by authors of color, queer authors, and stories about mental health, abuse, and injustice. The very topics our kids are begging us to be honest about. Again, members, we are not here to babysit books. We are here to govern. And while we spend time attacking libraries, we are not discussing the real crisis. Let's not forget about the anniversary that happened over the weekend. Kids are dying from gun violence, not books. Do you hear me? Those that are talking? Kids are dying from gun violence, not books. Families are being evicted. Schools lack counselors. Teachers are leaving the profession in droves. We're here debating books while schools lack basic resources and kids are being failed by the systems around them. No child has ever died from a book, but many, like me, have been saved by one. I urge you to vote no on SB13 for every kid who has ever needed a lifeline and found it between the pages of a book. Thank you.
Mr. Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I still have to remind myself every once in a while that it's 2025, because I feel like somehow we're back in the 1980s, because that's when I remember us having a giant moral crisis about Dungeons and Dragons, about swear words on CDs, on music, and people showing too much cleavage on TV. And it was a giant moral crisis. People said, this is the end of everything. Society is going to collapse. And I'm still here, and you're still here, and everyone else is still here. And all the people who were kids back at that time. I was a kid in the 80s. I listened to Guns N' Roses with the explicit lyrics sticker on it. And despite those warnings, I don't think anything happened because I heard bad words. And here we are in 2025. While our school systems are collapsing, while our people are losing their jobs and going hungry, while everything around us is in disarray, and we're worried about bad words in books. Sometimes I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, just being here. It is just bizarre that this is what our focus is on. We've been on this bill for like 3 hours now. And this is the priority? This is a priority for this body? To ban books with bad words in it because people who have never even read the books object to it because it has bad words? That is insanity. I think the vast majority of Texans would watch us during this debate and go, what the hell is going on there? What are these people doing? There are so many, like just thousands of other problems in our world right now that need to be addressed, and this is what we're doing. At the end of the day, these are just words. And, like one of the concepts I have to explain to people all the time when we work on criminal legal matters is, hey, you don't get to use physical violence when somebody uses words because they're just words. I said, what if they're really, really bad words? It's like, it doesn't matter. They're just words. I've had judges tell people this. I've had prosecutors tell people this. It's just words. Words don't hurt you. Words are just words. They're ideas in your head. You hear them 1 second and they're out of your mind the next. They're just words. And what's more striking is that, again, not just reliving the moral panic of 40 years ago, but doing it on issues, on books. And many times, the things we discussed today, books that have already gone through this process, books that have already done this. My son, one of his books in 5th grade was Fallen Angels. This was a curriculum book, not required reading, but a part of the books he could select to do his project on. This is a book about Vietnam and the experiences of soldiers of Vietnam. This book, Fallen Angels, has won multiple awards. The South Carolina Book Award for young adults, the New York State Charlotte Award in 1992, the Keystone to Reading Book Award in 1994, again for young readers, the Coretta Scott King Book Award for the author in 1989, the Margaret Edwards Award in 1994. This is a book used by schools all the time. And I tell you, me reading this book with my 5th grader, it was enlightening. Because when we read through this, he did not care about the bad words at all. Because he has already heard them. Because he's on YouTube. He's on TikTok. He's on social media. He sees it. Even with restrictions, he sees it. He hears it. Look on media. Look at TV. Look at everything else. And you're like, we're worried about books in libraries. I don't think there's a lot of kids stampeding toward libraries to find all the things they can't find anywhere else. And that's what we're worried about. And with this book, we went through this book, and what bothered him was the way people were treated, was the horrific things that happened, talking about the discontent, talking about the violence, talking about the suffering, talking about the frustrations of the soldiers on the ground, watching their mental health break down piece by piece. And throughout all this book, the F word is used dozens, if not hundreds and hundreds of times. Other words, racial epithets were used. The book talked about soldiers going to see prostitutes because that was reality. That was the fact of life, and it caused problems for soldiers because some of them were killed. They were baited to come out, and they were killed when they saw those prostitutes. And that was a problem. There was a passage in the book that talked about a mother who strapped explosives to her baby and then detonating them. And the author of the book having to watch this and go through it. There were no bad words in that passage. But that passage was probably the most instructional and most shocking and probably the hardest for him to read. But it was important for him to have those lessons because that is the reality of war. That is the reality of what has happened to our service members, the reality of what our history is. The more we sugarcoat, the more we conceal, the more we censor, the more our children don't know what life is and can't deal with it. We should not censor ideas because it makes us uncomfortable. We should discuss those ideas. We should allow our children to learn and to grow. Bad words that they've already heard 1,000 times will not hurt them if they read it one more time in a great book that gives it context and discussion and explains why things are happening, why bad things happen, why good things happen, and how people react to those things. We should cherish and value our books, even with the books that we disagree with, because ideas are what makes civilization work. We would not be moving forward. We would not be progressing as the human civilization if we did not have books. I urge you to vote no. I urge you to stand against this new moral panic, just like the old moral panic. It too will pass. But I fear that we will have done incalculable damage to our education system, to our kids, and to everyone else. All of us, many of us in here who read those exact same books as required reading when we were kids. It didn't damage you. It won't damage the kids today.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the first thing I want to say, members, is if this is along the lines of one of the themes of our session of protecting children, when we haven't done anything about the proliferation of guns and gun violence, I would assert to you that a gun is a lot more dangerous to a child than a book, and I don't even care what's in that book. So in the short time that I've been in this legislature, we have continuously relaxed gun laws and allowed more and more access to the point where gun violence is now the leading cause of death of children in the state of Texas, gun violence. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about book banning and how we're again repeating history, not just from last session, but from almost the beginning of recorded time. And those in the past that have, I'm calling it book banning, but you're just restricting access and silencing voices. The people who have done that in the past have always been on the wrong side of history. This time, this bill, SB13, seeking to establish library advisory councils, it sounds all official and proper. But it's just a construct to facilitate banning books, limiting access, and silencing voices. Book banning has been practiced for centuries. The earliest recorded incident that I could find,
Mr. Frank, for what
not
purpose?
at this time,
He does not yield this time.
dates back to Han Dynasty in China, the emperor burned all books of the past explicitly to erase its history. Julius Caesar burned down the great library of Alexandria in Egypt, 48 BC. 15th century Italy saw mass destruction of books to erase all vanities, to erase vanities. The first book to be banned in the United States was in 1650 when the Massachusetts Bay Colony condemned William Pynchon's The Meritorious Price of Our Redemption because it refuted Puritan doctrine. You might say that went against the community standards of the time. In 1873, Congress passed the Comstock Law, condemning the trade of literature and articles deemed obscene or immoral for
Parliamentary
use.
inquiry.
Mr. Frank, for what purpose?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Do you have to speak on the bill, or is this, are you able to speak on absolutely anything? We've talked book bannings. Are we supposed to speak on the bill, or can we talk gun violence, anything and everything we want? What are the rules on speaking on the bill?
Mr. Frank, members are supposed to confine their remarks to the bill at hand.
Okay, is there any consequence to that, or do we just go 10 minutes and talk about whatever we want to?
Mr. Frank, I am reminding the members to confine their remarks to the bill at hand and not other issues.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So while I consider Mr. Frank's remarks to be valuable for the sake of burning time, that's not what I'm up here for. I'm up here to talk about limiting access to books, which is exactly what this bill is about. In this country, in the late 18th century and early 19th century, modernist writers were fighting back against book restrictions. They wrote about all kinds of topics that had been considered taboo. Taboo topics like thoughts about the First World War, Industrial Revolution, and breaking social traditions. And again, this bill calls out community standards. I would say social traditions exactly mirrors that. Works by Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald were banned during this period. In 1929, Hemingway's book, A Farewell to Arms, was banned for crude subject matter because it depicted gruesome accounting of World War I. That might have been considered against community standards or even profane. F. Scott
Mr.
Fitzgerald's.
Ms. Hicklin, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield?
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
I will when I'm finished, thank you.
Not at this time.
The Great Gatsby was banned because the affair between Daisy and Gatsby included themes of sex and adultery, and there was violent language as well. Folks in the communities at that time thought that book was profane, which again is called out in this exact book. So will Hemingway's classic be considered too violent for community standards? Will The Great Gatsby be deemed profane and removed from bookshelves? And for those of you that think I'm being hyperbolic, in the school district I represent, in Katy ISD, they literally banned a Dr. Seuss book that had been
Mr.
on the
Speaker.
shelf for 50 years because it showed a bare bottom of a
Ms.
creature.
Hicklin, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield?
Mr. Rosenthal, will you yield?
I will be happy to yield at the end of my remarks. Just
Not
2
at this
minutes.
time.
And you know that Rep. Rosenthal got to point out the 1930s in Germany when the Nazis banned thousands of books that were written by Jews, communists, and others, including works by Albert Einstein, Sigmund Freud, Ernest Hemingway, Helen Keller, Jack London, and Thomas Mann. Many works banned in the past are considered classics now. Those who have sought to ban works in the past were short-sighted and always on the wrong side of history. And I'm just going to quote a famous poet and philosopher named Neil Peart, who wrote, "They say there are strangers who threaten us, are immigrants and infidels. They say there is strangeness, too dangerous, in our theaters and bookstore shelves. Those who know what's right for us must rise and save us from ourselves." It's truly unfortunate that we're back in the same place today, members, and I just hope you will think long and hard before voting for this member.
Mr.
This
Speaker.
measure.
Ms. Hickler, for what
Will the
purpose?
gentleman yield?
Will you yield, Mr. Rosenthal?
I will.
He will.
Representative Rosenthal, do you know that, was it The Meritorious Price of Our Redemption, one of the books that you mentioned?
Yes.
You'll be happy to know that that, among every other book that you mentioned, is available for purchase on Amazon.
Oh,
Thank you.
I didn't know that this bill was about Amazon. Aren't we
If-
supposed to
if-
confine our remarks to the content of the bill?
If books can be accessed on Amazon, they're not banned. We're talking about restricting
we're talking about
sexually explicit and age inappropriate materials in a way that protects children in accordance with the Texas Penal Code and the Education Code. Thank you.
Is that a question, Ms. Hickman? Because if it's a question about limiting access, then I would say we're talking about limiting access. And I had likened at the beginning of my remarks, limiting access to banning books.
Mr. Speaker,
Ms. Placer, for what purpose?
does the gentleman yield for some questions?
Mr. Rosenthal, would you yield?
I will.
Representative Rosenthal, do you have to buy books on Amazon?
I believe you do.
And do you have to buy books at the library?
No, you don't.
So parents who can't afford to buy books on Amazon, where are they getting books for their children?
I hope at the library.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Manuel, for
will the
what
gentleman
purpose?
yield for a
Would you
few
yield,
questions?
Mr. Rosenthal?
Representative Rosenthal, where have we ever banned books and it has been positive for our society?
I would assert anybody who seeks to limit access or silence voices is on the wrong side of history.
And for people who are saying this isn't a ban, can you explain how not allowing children, adults, to have access to information that is in a public space is a form of banning?
Anytime we seek to limit access in any way, particularly for those that don't have access or may have problems gaining access when you have to buy
The
stuff,
gentleman's time has expired.
it's the same. Thank you.
Is Ms. Jones of Harris on the floor of the House? The chair recognizes Ms. Jones of Harris to speak against the bill.
Mr. Speaker, members, SB13 gives a hand-picked group of people on a district-wide council the power to cancel culture, censor curiosity, and control what every kid can read, even if they don't represent the whole district. My granddaughter might not be able to read about her Black roots, her Indian heritage, her Latin American heritage, her Native American heritage, or languages of some of her grandparents, specifically Spanish and Malayalam, because someone on this committee will decide that's DEI and shut it down. But I bet she can still find books on her French and Irish heritage just fine. But why should only a part of her heritage be accessible in the public school her parents pay taxes for? Let kids learn all of who they are without interference, without intolerance, and without some committee controlling their identity. Please vote no.
Ms. Placer to speak against the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the last time I came up to this mic, I came up here to encourage you guys to vote for curriculum that would teach the horrors of communism to our students. And I would hope that one of the things that would be taught in that curriculum was how in these communist regimes, one of the ways that they would control populations of people was through banning books. In Ceausescu's Romania, books were banned, rewritten, and erased, not because they were dangerous to children, but because they were dangerous to power. SB13 may not call itself censorship, but in effect, it is the same thing, giving the government the authority to decide what stories are too uncomfortable, too complicated, or too real for our students to read. Look, you guys, I grew up hearing these stories, these horrors of communism. I grew up hearing stories of how teachers had to whisper truths behind closed doors because it was scrubbed from the bookshelves. And now in 2025, I fear we are planting those same seeds here in Texas. The state that raised me, the state that I love. This bill does not protect children. It protects adults from having hard conversations. And it sets a precedent that the state, not parents, not teachers, not communities, get to decide which ideas are acceptable. We do not protect liberty by silencing. We do not strengthen education by censoring it. And we do not honor democracy by fearing the diversity of the human experience. So I humbly ask you, my colleagues, to please vote no for these communistic ideals and to SB 13.
Mr. Tallarico, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, does the gentlelady yield for some
Would
questions?
you yield, Ms. Plesha?
It'd be my honor.
He will.
Thank you, Representative Plessa, for your comments. So a lot of the discourse around this bill is about removing sexually explicit material or harmful material. Many of those prohibitions already exist in our statute, and I think almost every member of this body can agree with removing filth, as Chairman Buckley described it, from our libraries, if it is ever in our libraries. But is it fair to say that our concern is that there are other broad categories, including books that are inconsistent with community values or books that are considered offensive, that those broad categories now could lead to the removal of books where maybe just the majority disagrees with the ideas present in those books? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's absolutely my fear, and that's why I'm standing up here speaking in opposition to this bill.
Are you aware that some of our colleagues have complained about cancel culture?
Yes, I hear that all the time when we're being called snowflakes.
Well, whether it was Nazi book bonfires on the far right or Mao's Cultural Revolution on the far left, book banning is the original cancel culture.
I would agree with you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative Plessa.
I ask you guys to vote no on this bill.
Chair recognizes Mr. Manuel to speak against the bill.
Members, I know it's late, and I know a lot of you are tired, and you're tired of hearing about this bill. Let's just talk about the facts of reality. The book that many of you were praising and wanting to talk about, the Bible, was put together by Caesar. It was put together by the Roman government. It was a book that was put together, and we say we believe that what was left in it was ordained by God. That was a form of censorship. When you talk about a form of censorship and you're looking at different authors that are happening, no one is saying let children read or look at pornography. And for the most part, many of you know that I'm actually pretty conservative. I don't like certain things in stores, and many of you are confused about it. I'm not, but I'm someone who believes that we should have certain things not in public for children to see. But when you start banning books that are in libraries, which is not pornography, because unless you have not ever been in a library, you would know that there is not pornography in a library. But what is also more important is, for many of you who forget, there are cell phones and things called VPNs where you as an adult or a child can look up any of the things you're saying you don't want them to have. Unless you're poor and you don't have money, then this is who you are barred from. This is what historically has always happened. If you can stop poor people from being able to read information, books that you deem that are not necessary, then what you're doing is you're trying to change a culture of people from the bottom up. All I'm asking you to do is understand this. History always moves forward, even if it is at a slow pace. And the same histories that you all are trying to protect right now by voting for this bill, you are going to set a precedent one day for someone who is much more left-leaning than you to ban the information that you want your children to be able to read. Just like when you had black children going to schools that were named by Confederate soldiers, and they have been changed, that change will happen. And the history that you are trying to change, you will have set a precedent today saying, yes, we can and we will ban the information that you want to teach your children. Because I'm also going to tell you this, there's a statue of Robert E. Lee in Sabine Pass. My great-grandmother, my fifth great-grandmother, was dropped off and sold off as a slave 24 minutes from where I currently live. If you don't think history is going to change, if you don't think the information that is going to change will change, vote for this bill. But do not complain when we no longer teach about the people that you think are patriots, because you are also leaving the door open for when we take down that Confederate statue that you say was for states' rights. This is a state right that you are taking from people, and what you're using is that people are looking at and reading obscene material. Just remember, we also think that is obscene. We also think it should not be taught to children. And when the day comes for you all to have to deal with that, do not complain, because you open the door for us.
The chair recognizes Ms. Gonzalez from Dallas to speak against the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. Here we are again on the verge of passing yet another dangerous bill that is in sync with the rest of your legislative agenda and that will chip away at the freedom of the press, freedom to learn, and the basic tenets of the concept of freedom. To think that some of you even campaign on your fight for individual freedom and liberty is questionable. Individual freedom and rights means rights for every individual. That means all parents, not just the parents you agree with. Every parent has the right to keep their child from reading a book they don't agree with, but you don't have the right to tell other parents what books their kids can read and cannot read. That's the problem with all these book bans. With every censorship bill this body rubber stamps from the Senate, Texas is less free than the day before. With every attempt to silence perspectives and opinions, our students suffer the consequences. And we are ill preparing future generations of Texas kids for the great big world around them. SB13 would allow for content challenge committees to be established for schools, consisting mostly of parents, that would assemble to determine whether books meet subjective standards for definitions like harmful or educationally unsuitable. This bill would put the entire catalog online and allow for parents to build their own personal ban lists from the comfort of their own home, meaning the bill author has spared problematic parents from embarrassing themselves at school in front of librarians who work really hard for very little money. Members, you must know that this is an insane proposition. And what's even worse is that if a bill is challenged, or a book is challenged and reviewed, the students can't even read the book while the book is being reviewed. Because of all these hoops, all the review, all the voting and convening of the committee, we're likely going to see a chilling effect in the coming years, where members of the community will be hesitant to donate books to any library, whether it's a school or not. And because of the politicization of the public library system, we already know that librarians feel under attack and that there's record levels of distrust between parents, the public, and our libraries. We are losing hardworking librarians because of all these politics you insist on entertaining here on the House floor. By passing this bill, you will close children off to the opportunity and sow distrust between them and their parents. By telling kids they can't let curiosity be their guide, you're actually telling them that the world isn't worth exploring. You're telling them there's no room to grow. You're telling them that if they feel different from everyone else, way down deep inside, that they need to push their uniqueness further down, and you're telling them that they shouldn't spend time getting to know the person they feel they're meant to be. I'm standing up here fighting against this bill and every other bill targeting my community that you've passed this session, because I'm afraid for the kids who grew up like I did. Gay and with lots of questions about the fundamentals of life, questions about what it means to be me, and with few answers from adults around me. When the adults around me couldn't answer my questions, I turned to books. When bills like this come up, I think about kids who grew up in communities like mine. They grew up in tight-knit neighborhoods with loving parents, their tíos or tías, their abuelos, abuelas, who would sacrifice anything for their children and their family, but sometimes didn't understand the best way to support them. That's what my household and schools were like growing up. When we debate bills like SB13, I think about my nieces and my nephews. Being their aunt is one of the greatest privileges of my life, and I'm thankful for the opportunity my brothers and my sister have given me to be present and active in their lives. I also think these kids are lucky to have a loving and cool aunt like me. They are taught the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you, to love one another and be kind to everyone. I think about what would have happened to me if I hadn't had the loving, supportive family I was born into, or the professional educators who dedicated their lives to teach kids to love their curious nature and to love themselves, even when that was hard to get at home. And make no mistake, you will make schools scarier. Kids will be too afraid to speak up, ask questions, learn about themselves, or even ask help from adults. The world will be darker, schools will become less friendly and accepting, and these changes will push LGBTQ kids away from safety of school and education, things that this body claims that they want to improve. We've seen this movie before, folks, not only in this chamber, but throughout history. We're a legislative session away from this body creating a Fahrenheit 451 style fireman department statewide. When we mass ban books, we will be volunteering. Will you be volunteering to empty the shelves in the library, or will you be burning the books in town square with the rest of the crazy folks? LGBTQ kids have been here before too. Repression, subjugation, erasure is littered throughout American history. But if we police our libraries and librarians, we should all be worried about what they will turn to when books aren't there for them. Vote no on SB 13. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Dr. Buckley to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the hours are waning, and I'll be brief. But let me tell you how we got here. About 2.5 to 3 years ago, there were members of communities that reached out to schools, and they were concerned about some of the library books that they've seen their children have access to. And parents were told in resounding fashion, hey, nothing to see here. I called a superintendent of a very large school district and I said, hey, I've had some complaints about this. I said, I'm certain there's no way that these titles and these subjects and books with these agendas are on your shelves, are they? He said, I can't imagine that they were there. Down to the last title, every single title was there. These are titles that 95% of the members in this chamber have said either publicly or privately, there is no way kids should have access to that. That's what Senate Bill 13 is about. Senate Bill 13 understands that too often and for too long our libraries have been filled with agendas. And it's time to end that. But the way to end it is to empower our local leaders and our parents locally to find some resolution. We have members of this body that got here because they dared to stand up to local leaders that said there's just not a process, or the process was placed back on the parent in an effort that wasn't designed to reach a resolution. Senate Bill 13 creates a framework that will allow these issues to be resolved. It hears the voices of moms and dads and community members, and it ultimately puts it in the hands of locally elected officials that can then act on that. Community standards, local control, parental transparency. We talk about those from the left and the right. We talk about the importance of that all the time in this body. But for some reason, when it comes to this issue. We wax nostalgic about the books we read when we were kids, the books that we know are not involved in this bill. And it is because the ones that are cannot be defended. That is why we're here today. And finally, members, a speaker before me said we should cherish and value books. Well, maybe so. But I would argue we should cherish and value our kids more, and Senate Bill 13 will do exactly that. And with that, I move passage of Senate Bill.
Mr. Speaker,
Ms. Hicklin, for what purpose?
will the gentleman yield?
Would you yield, Dr. Buckley?
Absolutely.
Chairman Buckley, I am one of those parents. I was appalled by the things that I saw that our children were exposed to, wicked, vile, filth, that clear violations of the Texas Penal Code and the Education Code. It's fair to say that trust has been broken between parents and public schools. As a parent, we want to know that our kids are safe in the libraries. Is it a correct understanding of this bill that trust can be rebuilt by allowing parents transparency in the ability to access what is in our public school libraries?
Absolutely. It gives parents the ability to tell the library, which I think they need to know, which titles that a child should be, that a parent recognizes that they would allow a child to check out. And the other way, you can find out what titles your kids are checking out. And if you see some of those titles, it gives a parent the opportunity to have those conversations with their kids. That's all we want. That's all we ask for.
Is it your understanding that the development of this advisory council in the same model that's been established with the SHAC will provide a way for communities to engage and concerned parents to engage in the process that would inform the trustees of appropriate community standards?
Absolutely. Who knows better? We're talking about parents, we're talking about community members, teachers and librarians, health professionals, everyone that really can reflect the values of a community and what our kids should have access to are front and center in this bill.
So this is a way to emphasize local control.
Yes, and it leads us to a process defined in statute that allows us to resolve these concerns. As a former school board member, I would relish the opportunity to hear back from the community of the things, the titles, and the books that they would expect to be in our libraries. And I think that's a valuable tool for our local boards.
One of the things that I encountered in my journey of protecting children against sexually explicit and age-inappropriate materials that were throughout our libraries, every secondary public school library, was that there was just a lack of a process, not just for removing a book, but also for bringing a book in. One of the things that I encountered a lot was whenever I would ask the question, how do these books get in? How did they get here? A lot of times I would hear, well, they came in with a bulk purchase. And we don't even know what's in our library. It's not possible for a librarian or a school to evaluate every single book in the library. Is this, number one, is this a way to provide for a process of the books that are coming in?
Absolutely. You know, I am certain that as a school board member years ago, that I approved the purchase of books, and that there were probably 2 people in the district that knew what those books were. And in this day and time, given the titles that we've found in some of our schools, and I will also say many schools have done a great job of removing those titles. Others have not. But this would be a great tool to put eyes on those so that we have the standards of a community and our community values reflected in those purchases and that procurement. And
even to that point on a statewide scale, What would you think that there would be benefit in having consistency of this type of process across the state versus individual ISDs?
I think it builds trust again. And I think that anytime and I'll go back to the shack, I think the shack process has built trust in our communities on the types of materials as far as health education that we have. And our shack communities have gone beyond that as well to provide wellness opportunities throughout school districts and are really doing great things. And that's because we brought parents and teachers and everyone together to solve a problem and then came to an agreement.
Does this bill add new definitions to the mandated standards that are already prohibited by Texas Public Schools?
Yes. Indecent content and profane content.
Does a SLAC committee have to follow the mandated standards when recommending materials?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Does a SLAC committee have to follow the mandated standards when recommending materials?
Yes.
So this is consistent with the laws that we've enacted and we've agreed upon?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a framework. It's a guideline for them to follow as they put their eyeballs on these materials.
Okay. The value in creating this standard across the state is because children across the state, no matter what zip code, deserve to be protected. And parents need the tools to engage in their neighborhood schools and ensure that their children are safe, that their children are protected, and also that there is a process to engage. I thank you for bringing this bill. I actually testified for this legislation in the 88th. Seeing the value of it, and I'm so grateful for all of these efforts that it's come to this point, and parents are finally empowered with protecting their children and building that trust again with our public schools.
All right.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you very much. All right. I move. Not yet.
Ms. Howard, for what purpose?
Would the gentleman yield?
Dr. Buckley, would you
Absolutely.
yield?
I want to clarify something that I think I just heard you say a while ago, which, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you were insinuating and said, actually used the word agenda, that as if librarians have an agenda that they're trying to impose on our students. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, I think when you look at some of the titles that were in our schools that many parents found startling, I think you would claim that they're if not an agenda, certainly a difference of opinion is what was appropriate for children.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Okay. I move passage.
The question occurs on passage to third reading of Senate Bill 13. This is a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Did they? Have all members voted? Have all members voted? There being 87 ayes, 57 nays, Senate Bill 13 passes to third reading.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Alcott, for what purpose?
I move